Hey guys, welcome back. So today I wanted to do something that is a little different than most of the Simpsons videos that I've done in the past, where I review a piece of merchandise and talk a little bit about the show. Today I'm going to do a kind of video that I like to call a Simpsons Tidbits video, where I just talk about little things about the Simpsons, whether it's theories that I have or just little things that I've noticed while watching The Simpsons, as it's one of my favorite shows, and it's the show that I watch the most of right now. Now, the historical Simpsons episodes are supposed to be non-canonical, and it's because every time that they are brought up, like with a future or past story, it's a story that's being told, and the same with the original Treehouse of Horror episodes. It was always originally a story that's being told by the characters, and therefore they just replace themselves as the characters that they're talking about. But a fun theory that I've kind of thought about is, what if those historical stories aren't non-canonical, and it's literally just the Simpsons throughout history, and because as we see through the series, they don't age, but the world around them does. That is something that we observe in the series of the show, like, no question, because they originally have just an old school telephone like on the wall or on the counter, but now they have cell phones. So the world does evolve around the family of the Simpsons and Springfield in general, but they don't age. So what if those historical stories were actually canonical and those are just the characters of the Simpsons throughout history? That would be super cool. And the next tidbit I have is actually very related to the last one that I just talked about, and it's actually the only canonical progression of time that happens in The Simpsons. And it's actually, now that I think about it, kind of hard to say canonical because it's in Stark Raving Dad, which is like the one Simpsons episode that has been taken off of Disney Plus and the latest DVD releases of The Simpsons, Blu-ray as well. So I consider it canonical because I actually own it on YouTube. So the first time that I watched through a lot of The Simpsons, the very first few seasons, I watched it on YouTube. I was buying seasons. So I own Stark Raving Dad on YouTube. So it was a Simpsons episode that I watched originally throughout my run. So I count it as a canonical Simpsons episode for sure. And for anybody who remembers that episode, that's the episode with Lisa's birthday and Michael Jackson helps Bart write a song for her. And so in the episode, Lisa is turning from 7 to 8. That's a progression of time. They never change ages, except for then. So there is an exception to the whole The Simpsons don't age rule, but it only happens once. And it's actually very similar, it's almost exactly the same to how in South Park, in Season 4, they actually moved up to 4th grade from being in 3rd grade, but they stayed in 4th grade for the rest of the series. Very similar to that, because it only happened one time and it was a progression of time. So the next little tidbit that I want to talk about has to do with Herb and Homer designing the car. So, spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about Modlanders. I've heard on the internet how a lot of people have said that Maud Flanders' death was not actually Homer's fault, which I agree with. It's true. He did provoke it into happening, so he definitely had a hand in it, but he didn't cause it. But what I think is even less of Homer's fault is Herb and his business failing. Because first of all, you have this guy who owns the car company, right? And he had just met his brother, and he knows nothing about the guy, and he puts him in charge of designing a car. And so, in my opinion, that is 100% his fault. First of all, he didn't get to know Homer, and if he would have known not to do that. And so it's yeah, that's 100% Herb's fault for doing that. I don't know why he hates Homer so much. He literally should have been I didn't know that you were that stupid. But he wouldn't have had a reason to really hate him. He could have said that you're stupid, because it makes sense. But, yeah, there's no reason for him to hate him, because that's just his own mistake right there, is putting somebody who he has no idea about in charge of his car company, pretty much. Design a car in charge of that part of the company. That's ridiculous, it's just ridiculous for Herb to stay mad at Homer like that. I have no idea why that's the case. And the last little Simpsons tidbit that I wanted to talk about for today is actually something that I noticed that really explains a lot of Mr. Burns' character and his actions. So in Season 8, Episode 12, Mountain of Madness, that's the episode where Mr. Burns has everybody come up to the mountain, and he has everybody pair up in teams, and the last team to get to the cabin on the top of the mountain is fired. Homer and Mr. Burns get paired up, right? And they go along the hike, right? And once they get out of sight of everybody else, Mr. Burns asks how Homer would feel about cheating. And Mr. Burns says that cheating is the advantage that man gives himself. So that's Mr. Burns' perspective on cheating and being dishonest, basically. You know, is that it's man's advantage that he gives himself. That just shows how Mr. Burns thinks and why he does a lot of what he does. Not exactly the whole blocking out the sun thing, that's just ludicrous, but yeah, all of his greediness and evil actions. Not quite at cartoon supervillain evil like he is when he blocks out the sun, but all of those evil acts that people actually do that he does a lot of, yeah, you could see why he does those, is because that's his mindset, is that cheating is the advantage that man gives himself. And then he pulls out a couple of snowmobiles, and they sheet their way up to the mountain. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this new episode of this new series that I want to be doing, these Simpsons Tidbit videos. I think they'd be really cool. And I'd like to hear what you guys think of it down in the comments. And subscribe for more.